welcome to UC Today with me, David Dungay. Today I'm talking to Bertrand from Kurmi. Welcome to the show, Bertrand. How are you?
I'm fine, David. Thank you and welcome.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about UC service management as part of our July themed month. I'm really excited to have this conversation. But Bertrand, before we get into that, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and Kurmi?
Yes, so Kurmi Software actually provides solutions to help companies deploy, provision, and manage their UC solutions. In other words, we simplify basically and we automate the way people are provisioning their UC solutions. It has become quite complex, especially with a lot of diverse technologies being used in the UC space. And so Kurmi comes as a single pane of glass to basically manage all these different technologies and all these different solutions. So obviously I'll go into more details as we discuss today. But the company basically provides a lot of service. Our services to big enterprises as well as to service providers. We are present basically worldwide. We have customers in the 4 continents. Actually, 80% of our revenue is coming from outside of France, even though Kurmi is French by origin. Just to introduce myself, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer, which means I basically manage the sales, the go-to-market, and the partners and alliances globally for Kurmi. So very pleased to be here.
I want to start with change management, Bertrand. I hear this phrase a lot. We are seeing these very complex multi-vendor environments. Tell us a little bit about why we're seeing the need for change management in businesses, particularly right now.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of changes in the way we work. We've seen that in the last decade. Obviously, hybrid work has become the norm. There's been a tremendous growth in technologies that people use for their day-to-day work, and also obviously the pandemic has accelerated a lot of our a lot of these changes. So change management obviously has become the norm. Hybrid work, as I said, has become the norm, and as we work from home, we need to access a lot of new tools, a lot of new platforms from different vendors. And it has become very complex to manage for IT staff, basically, in the corporations. And I think there's another item also that we are seeing, is that people tend to change jobs more than ever before. And there is, I don't know if you heard last year in the US, there is what was called the Great Resignation, where 48 million Americans resigned from their job. Now, if you think about 48 million people leaving their job, and for most of them joining a new company, a few weeks thereafter. Now we're talking about hundreds of millions of transactions in the UC systems of those companies, because you need to offboard, 48 million people, you need to onboard 48 million people in a new company, and that's a lot of changes. And unless you have the right automation tool to basically manage these changes, it's becoming a nightmare. So in summary, changes is really driven by the hybrid work development, the multiplication of technologies, and of course the migration to the cloud, because applications tend to have to be managed from the cloud more and more, because when you work remotely, you have to access applications that for most of them will be on the cloud as opposed to on-prem, which was the case 20 or 30 years ago.
Wow, 48 million people, that's a lot of people to offboard and then onboard again to a new business. I really want to tackle this from the employee experience side of things as well. How critical is simplifying this unified communications management, when it comes to creating a great employee experience?
Yeah, so obviously, for the reasons I've explained before, enterprises cannot anymore manage those technologies, those tools, those platforms on their own if they don't have the right tools, if they don't have the right ways to simplify and automate the way they actually manage these IT and UC systems. And when they do that, when they onboard new automation systems, They will save cost, they will save time, they will make less mistakes and errors in the management of their users. And all of this obviously will contribute to employee satisfaction. Now, when we talk about employee, I'm actually referring to two types of employees: the end users, so people actually using the tools that we talk about today, the video conference tools, the collaboration tools, and so on and so forth, but also, and equally importantly, the IT staff who are managing those users in the background, right? And so from an employee perspective, from an end user perspective, if you are a new person, I've joined Kurmi actually 4 months ago. I was quite pleased on day one to have all my UC capabilities basically ready for me. When you have this, obviously you can get on the job from day one. So, and that obviously contributes to customer and employee satisfaction. If you change location, for example, you move from one building to another, the next thing you want to have is, the day you arrive in a new building, you want everything to be ready. So it's not anymore about a physical phone, because we don't have those anymore. It's about having from your PC basically the right applications in the right place. So obviously that does contribute to employee satisfaction. Another angle is, and Kurmi is also helping with this, is that we provide what we call self-service portals. So employees can actually do some changes themselves. So simple tasks, such as, for example, I want to change my password, or I want to change the way my work from home configuration is set. These things can actually be managed by the employee themselves. They don't have to call IT or open a ticket with the IT, which is usually a source of frustration. So all of this, I think, does contribute to employee satisfaction from the end user perspective. And then there's the IT staff, which I think is equally important, because obviously IT staff are usually measured on how efficient they are. They are measured on their customer satisfaction. So if the employee is satisfied, obviously the IT staff will be equally satisfied. And if they are more efficient in the way they actually solve problems, that means that they will be able to spend more time on what really matters to them, which is not admin stuff, but more specialized, more complex work. And again, all of that can be achieved through the type of automation tool that, for example, Kurmi and others provide. I just wanted to give you some numbers to maybe reflect and show the benefit that automation can provide and simplification can provide. We did a research recently with Pulse, and the result of this, which the survey basically showed that 83% of the people interviewed assessed that to create or to onboard a user in their UC system took an average of 30 minutes, 30. And 90% of the same IT staff estimated that the annual cost of moving of the what we call MACDs, move, add, change, delete, so all these UC transactions, cost them $500,000 on average per year. Now we've done some simulation with our own system where we compared the time to onboard a user manually versus onboard a user using an automation platform. And the benefit was a ratio of anywhere between 5 and 10. So that means that what used to take 30 minutes to create a user, all of a sudden becomes, let's say 3 minutes. And the $500,000 all of a sudden becomes $50,000. It's not the same thing, right? So yes, employee satisfaction is obviously key, and simplification, automation does contribute to this. But this is also a bigger, I think, a critical objective, which is, to save money to the company, to enhance the efficiency of a company, and to allow basically everybody to focus on their job and not on fixing IT issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you answered a little bit of my next question already, but I really want to go into a bit more detail into how Kurmi's solving some of those challenges. You mentioned a little bit around your self-service and the automation built into the platform. But talk to me more about how's Kurmi solving these challenges, particularly in the context of hybrid working.
Right. So I'd like to maybe suggest 3 things that I'd like to put forward. So as I mentioned before, Kurmi is about automation and simplification of UC solution management. Now, obviously, the value of Kurmi is is growing when the number of technologies used by companies is multiple. So obviously a big corporation, with hundreds of thousands of employees, most of the time they will use several UC and IT solutions. They will use Cisco, they will use Microsoft, they may use Avaya, Mitel, Zoom, and others. And obviously having, 5 or 6 different admin system to manage the same user, because the same user might actually be using those different technologies, right? So think about the IT guy having to update 5 or 6 times the same user in 5 different systems, obviously not scalable. So Kurmi basically comes in between the IT staff and all these different collaboration systems, and then you just do one update and all the systems are updated. And the way we do this is that we have developed what we call connectors. So a connector is a link between Kurmi admin system and all the different UC platforms, and those connectors are constantly updated because obviously those UC platforms are changing, right? New releases, software releases, new features, and so on and so forth. And this is our role, our job, to make sure that the connectors are always up to date, and it's not the customer having to worry about this anymore. So multi-techno environment is obviously where Kurmi brings in a lot of value. Then there's everything related to security, and especially in the context of hybrid work, as you were mentioning. Obviously, hybrid works means people start to connect to applications from different places. They don't always do this through a VPN, so it's not always secured. So you want to make sure that your application is actually really, really secured. And obviously, Kurmi is bringing all the security elements needed to make sure that all transactions are actually secured. And that's obviously critical in the hybrid work environment. And then maybe the third aspect I wanted to highlight, there are more, but this is the 3 that I thought were meaningful. I mentioned earlier that hybrid work comes with migration to the cloud. Now, migration to the cloud is everything but easy. I mean, it is complex. So when an enterprise wants to migrate a platform or a tool or a UC solution from on-prem to the cloud, it is a complex process. Because they have to, usually the way they would do it, they would do a pilot, then they would migrate one site, and then if it works, they would try and migrate another one. In this process, they will have to work with different admin systems from the different techno that they use. And again, it is quickly becoming a very, very difficult process. So Kurmi can help with this migration by basically if we have the right connections, the right connectors in place, and the right setup, then you just have to migrate the Kurmi element of it, and everything else will be done in the background. So we can definitely help migration, and we see a lot of customers today that are migrating from either one technology from another, but more frequently from on-prem to cloud, and they see the value of Kurmi in this process. And again, very relevant in the hybrid work environment.
Great. I mean, I'm really interested. We are in this complex world of different technologies and using different vendors and so forth. How reliant have businesses become on their service providers as a result of this sort of the environment we all find ourselves in this sort of hybrid working world?
Well, I think it is increasingly difficult for corporations to manage this complexity by themselves. And I'd like to believe that companies have to and do rely a lot more on their service providers, because this is their core business. Service providers are here to manage the integration, the complexity of all these different technologies, all these different platforms, and no corporation wants to defocus from their core business. Let people do what their core business is, right? So we're saying, I mean, our business model at Kurmi is we do sell mostly through service providers, because their role is to integrate, Kurmi, within their service offering in a seamless way, in a transparent way. Actually, a lot of customers are using Kurmi. They don't even know it is Kurmi, because it is sold, in a white label approach through those, managed service providers. And we do work with most of the biggest service providers in Europe and in the Americas, soon in Asia, because that's our next sort of move that we are working on. But yeah, at the moment we do work with a lot of the biggest service providers, and we need them as much as our customers, our end customers need them as well, because they're the glue between those two worlds, the techno vendors and the actual users of those technologies. Now there are also, we don't always only sell through service providers, we also sell through resellers. So some customers actually buy Kurmi, the brand, and the tool. But my belief is that most of what we'll be doing moving forward will be through those service providers. And our platform is what we call multi-tenant, which means that service providers can obviously themselves have multiple customers that they can manage seamlessly using our platform. So yeah, I very much believe in the fact that service providers are key and will be even more key in the future in this relationship.
Thanks, Bertrand. That's really, really insightful. But before we go, Bertrand, I want to just give our audience a few key takeaways. There'll be a lot of businesses watching today who are currently managing multi-vendor environments right now. What are your biggest takeaways from what we've discussed today? What should they be thinking about when it comes to the management of their tools and services?
Well, I think the one thing I hope they have understood is that this is complex, right? We are in a complex world, and we, Kurmi, are here to simplify and to help. So I think maybe the recommendation I have here and the takeaway is that I would probably ask companies to really evaluate their situation currently. What UC solutions are they using? Are they in a cloud environment, on-prem environment? Are they managing this manually, or are they using tools already? How much does it cost them to do this on an annual basis? How many resources do they use? I mean, I think it's actually a very important activity, I think, to evaluate oneself and to make sure that we all understand. I mean, the company understands. Are they optimizing basically the way they administer, UC and their UC and their end customers today? I think with that, they will quickly realize that there's probably a lot of, cost savings, time saving, process optimization they can actually achieve, by, using tools. And we, obviously at Kurmi, we can help them, go through this evaluation, through this analysis. We can also, organize demos for them to understand, what a tool like Kurmi can bring to their environment. But again, I think asking the right questions now is really very important, especially, as I said in the beginning, that there's been so many changes in the way we work and in the way our employees actually work, that this will probably further accelerate. And by the way, the pandemic is not over yet. It is becoming the norm, right, as opposed to a sort of 1 year or 2 year event. So we really have, companies have to be prepared to managing this moving forward.
Fantastic. Well, Bertrand, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insights on this UC service management space.
Excellent. And, for everybody, don't hesitate to visit our website, which is kurmi-software.com. And we'll be happy to, be in contact and discuss how we can help.
Thanks very much, Bertrand. And thank you for everyone who watched today. You've been watching me, David Dungay, at UC Today. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a like and a share on social media. That's it from me. See you next time.